We are just moments away from games here, so everyone in chat, strap in. Eric, I also saw the prediction in the chat just prior to the show, and it was actually dead even. The entire chat voted, and it was 50-50 on who was going to win this match. So I think that's even further proof that this is going to be a good one.
I think so. Again, these are active players. The last match we just commentated, Ding, bit of more of an unknown quantity for online chess in terms of competing regularly against these guys. But Nepomniachtchi and Giri, no, they live online.
Yep. And here we go. We're starting with something classic, Eric. And I guess maybe as a more general question, are we expecting classic openings, classic chess from these two against one another as they sort of feel things out in the 5 minute portion?
I absolutely think so. When you look at the two players, though, they are quite a bit different, even though they're both really strong. Nepo has a capability of tilting. I've played him quite a bit. I've played Anish a little bit. He also can play some pretty risky things. For example, Jan, he's defeated me in a chess.com tournament with the King's Gambit. I think he has a chessable course on there or some theory. Maybe
Yep.
he'll bring that out if things aren't going well, because if there's a format that you can play the King's Gambit, it's speed chess. Giri, though, has a reputation of being one of the most well-prepared players in the world, and it's a well-earned reputation, to clarify. So that's the question. Will Nepo play the Scotch? He plays against e4. He used to play the Scotch all the time, King's Gambit, and he is this classic Giuoco Piano. It depends how the match is going, how things start. You have a bad start, like Ding versus Hans, things can go real bad. But I think it's just normal for the players to begin something easy, something they're familiar with, and then react accordingly. But it's no surprise, just in chess these days, that this is the main line, as opposed to entering the Roy Lopez bishop c4s, where white is pinning their chances on just middle game play, pieces, tension. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of theory in some other lines that players are trying to avoid.
Yeah, and also we're early stages of this match, and it's all about adaptability, right? If something doesn't go well, you want to kind of figure out early what openings, what types of positions, what structures are working for you, and then try to stay within those boundaries. So, starting out with something that's really no risk for Jan here makes a lot of sense. We just see the move Queen B3; it's putting pressure on the B7 pawn. That's the direct threat, and the move Queen C8 in order to defend. Now, usually at some point, you want to play the move d4 with white. This is really what the whole opening is working towards, but you can't quite do it yet. So we're going to see a little bit more development, maybe the rook from a1 to d1, and certainly bishop e3. Now you're starting to get ideas like taking on a7. Maybe the knight on c4 can come back into the middle on e3, and you're looking at the f5 square, the d5 square, and of course, d4.
Yeah, fighting for inches here. Anish is a very solid player. He didn't want to play b6 until trading the bishops, because you don't want your bishop hemmed in. Um, just tickling the position a little bit. The trades aren't bad for black. It means, we're getting closer to an endgame. And even if white eventually plays d4, which you strive for, you want to gain space. Trading off
Mm-hmm.
two sets of pieces makes the player with less space much more comfortable. There's fewer issues, fewer pieces where you're like, I need to find a place for that piece. Those pieces are traded off. So even this knight on f6 is sitting pretty. Knight on f5 is good, but white doesn't have too many pieces to throw into the mix. In the Hans match, we saw bishop takes h6. We saw positions with the knight on f5, and you attack the king side. Well, here, white needs pieces on the king side to facilitate that attack. The knight on f5 is good, but we need a rook on g3, something like that. And with the move d5, well, it's questioning. Do you have time to swing your rook to g3 or not?
Yeah, I like that you just brought that up because that's exactly what we see here. The move rook e3, a little bit multi-purpose, right? You want to swing to g3, but also the move d5 there was taking advantage of the fact that the e pawn for white is a little bit overworked here. It needs to guard that knight on f5. So there are ideas of capturing on e4 here, Eric, and then maybe sacking the knight on e4. But due to the weakness to Anish's king, and yeah, he's going straight for this rook g3 move. This is very direct.
It's very direct, but queen e6 is such an important move because it covers h6. There's no knight takes h6, and black is preparing to take on e4, and probably force the queens off. And with the queens off, it's very hard to imagine white has checkmating possibilities with limited material on the king side. And
Hmm.
so right now, so far, so good for black. I mean, Jan is asking questions, but Anish is ready to meet them so far. Uh, Rook G4, he's still committing to the attack.
Yeah, there's some very and Anish leans in. I really think that the calculation is revolving around pawn takes on e4, and in that
I
case,
think I
White's
just go
queen
Rook
on
D8,
b3.
maybe.
Yeah, well, the queen on b3 would be loose. So I think you're either playing a casual move like Rook a8 to d8, or if he's thinking, which he is, I'm assuming he's looking at pawn takes e4, the queen's exchange, and then maybe pawn takes on e6, and trying to muddle up the position that way.
It's definitely a possibility. I think Jan playing Rook G4, quickly, Anish thinks like he believes in that move in these calculations that that
Hmm.
exchange on E4 doesn't quite work. I like Rook D8. The
Yeah,
drawback of swinging your Rook over to the king side. If this attack doesn't work, it takes longer for that Rook on G4 to get back into an endgame. You look at an endgame. An endgame is something where white, if the queens are traded off and the D file is contested, that Rook on G4, it's offside on the only open file. So right now there is an element of risk with the way Nepomniachtchi is playing, and Anish is saying, you know what? I'm playing standard moves, standard developing moves. I'm defending all your threats, and you're playing out of position here. If this attack
yep.
doesn't work on G7, that knight on F5, that rook on G4 aren't going to help this battle for the D file.
And I wonder, I was looking at Anish's camera there. Couldn't tell if he was maybe getting some kid aggro, maybe something distracting. He had a smile on his face, so he's, let me focus here. I gotta calculate.
Yeah, time to
Okay, he does go for
calculate, but
this.
I'd say like you look at Anish Giri, a position like this, technical position, pieces traded off, no big
Hmm.
attack for white. He has to be happy with the resulting position. And Nepo's trying to make that rook work. Rook
Yeah,
c4, pressure c7. I don't think white's doing poorly, but there's no way white should be better here.
right.
Black repelled the attack. Everything's guarded. Things are symmetrical. And these are the positions that can definitely determine a match when, like who's going to overpress here? Are the players just going to have a timid start? Because sometimes you lose a position like this where you have the expectation, this is fine, this is equal, I played all the right moves, and you still find a way to lose. That's so frustrating. Because the thing about speed chess is you can play the right moves and still lose because clock is such a big factor. And, it's an element that's arriving maybe in a minute. The players right now are playing at a good pace, but with still two rooks and a knight on the board, and now we see Nepomniachtchi playing b4. There's still some
Hmm.
imbalances. There's still possibilities to blunder. I guess any position you can blunder, but knights are on the board. Pawns are loose. D3 is a weakness for white. B6 is a weakness for black.
Yeah,
This
I
can
I
still
feel like
happen.
in spots like this, the one thing that I always like about White's position is that the king can act as a real participant, meaning when the king gets to e2, suddenly the rook on d1 is free to go to the b1 square. So even though it looks like maybe black is applying the pressure, I feel like a lot of these positions can turn around quickly. The knights get exchanged, and then suddenly black's king is not participating to the same degree that white's king is.
That's definitely a case. And I think Black's main argument is you can do everything Amon just mentioned, bring the king in, pressure b6. But what happens if Black puts a rook on a8? How can you overwhelm the b6 pawn while defending a4?
Right. Yeah, but we're going to see probably exactly this, actually. The king moving over to d2, and black is just going to apply pressure. I think Giri's going to be attacking the c3 pawn, the a4 pawn, so that if you ever want to capture b6, you're going to lose something in return. And as you mentioned, there's a full defensive idea with rook d to d6. And then once you defend everything, it's time for black's king to make it to the d6 square itself.
Yeah, without a doubt, the players are playing very precisely right now, and it's hard to say it's anything but equal. Just too many weaknesses for both sides. C3 needs to be guarded, A4 needs to be guarded, D5 is loose, B6 is loose. Typically, what
Hmm.
happens here is mass exchanges because you need to make a case. How can you win B6 without losing A4? And I don't see that right now.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult to to imagine. And there's F pawn, the C pawn, and the A pawn are all targets. And, there is even the possibility, Eric, of Rook to C6, King D2, and Rook back. But looks like we'll get a few more moves in this one.
Yeah, even if you want to play for a win, you need an imbalance. So that could be losing a pawn and getting a pass pawn. This is an imbalance right now. Black can win C3 after losing B6, so white has the passed A pawn, but black has more pawns in the middle. But after Rook B5, we could be looking at a position I'm on where Anish picks up a pawn.
Yeah,
it's
Nepomniachtchi will grab the pawn, but it looks to me like Anish wasn't expecting that, right? He might end up making a draw here, but he's really going to have to work for it a little more than he probably expected.
we could say it probably wasn't necessary.
Yeah, exactly.
But at this level, this endgame, up a pawn, but it's the outside A pawn, normally speaking, or was going to be. Now it's just the E pawn. This should be a draw, and the players have enough time. But your job is to squeeze every position you can in a match where you are ahead. And having that extra pawn as white means pawn endgames are typically winning if you can force the rooks off. If you can't force the rooks off, you need to push your pawns in a way to create an imbalance. Okay.
And
So
King
Rook
G7
C3.
is met by E6, so there's maybe a little bit of annoyance that the black king can't really get up to the G7 square, but that's about it.
Yeah. Still requires a blunder to mess up.
Yeah. And a lot of liquidation here.
Yeah, King G7, E6, as you mentioned, but that H pawn on its own isn't enough.
But Jan
Typically, the
is
problem
trying,
here,
right?
Jan is trying, and Anish is under 10 seconds, has to hold steady. The problem for white here typically is your king can get checked forever. Where is the shelter for white's king if black starts checking from behind? There isn't shelter, so he's looking to give up that pawn, go rook and pawn versus rook. This is still a book draw, but better than allowing infinite checks from behind.
Ooh, 1 second.
Oh, that was close. I was so immersed in the
Very
position,
close.
probably like Anish, that didn't even see it.
Yeah,
King in
he
town
went,
to
I
stop
think,
E6.
under a second there, and he's now got the right technique, but he's also pre-moving, so he's like getting that time back up to 5 seconds. It's a little bit better now.
Yeah, Anish is very competent in bullet. Black keeps placing the king on F7 every time white is ready to play E6. Even E6 doesn't work because you can check from behind. So pay attention to Nepomniachtchi's rook, that black rook. Its job is to just check white's king whenever there's an opportunity.
Yeah, and this has been well defended so far, but again, all it takes is one mistake, and we've seen it all in the SCC.
We absolutely have. And one thing to look out for here is at some point, white does have to push that E pawn, but he's waiting as long as possible to give opportunities to flag the opponent or for Anish to put a piece on the wrong square.
Right.
There aren't many tricks here, to be honest, but
he's trying every single one. But to Anish's credit, and you see that smirk from Nepomniachtchi there,